Let's see. Yeah, it's darkening up. Oh, yeah. It's darkening up before our very eyes. Yes, it is. I do believe we're getting a gold drop. Okay, good news. So we will just let that go and give it a chance for all the gold to come out of solution and drop to the bottom of the beaker. Well, hello, scrappers. Mike here. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to part 2 of me demonstrating my bulk IC processing technique. It's a continuous thing. It's not really a batch process. I've got chips at every stage going through this. Now, back in part 1, we sorted out some chips. We incinerated them. We crushed them in my ball mill and sifted out all of the junk metal from them. And what we got here is a whole bunch of black powder that should contain all of the gold bond wires from those chips. And what we're going to do today, what we're going to start off with in this video is doing a gravity separation on this stuff, because a lot of that black powder is ash and I want to get rid of it and just leave behind the gold bond wires and the crushed silicon dies of the IC chips, because the dies are hard to separate out. We'll leave them there. There's not that much material. So we're going to do gravity separation on this stuff. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the bucket up, maybe halfway with water. Going to stir it up really good. I'm going to put some jet dry in it to help prevent stuff from floating. That'll break up the surface tension on the water. We might have created some pyrolysis oils from incomplete combustion of the chips. That oil will promote flotation of the gold, which we don't want. We want the gold to sink. So I use some jet dry. And we'll pour off the dirty water after letting it sit for a little while for the gold to settle to the bottom. And then we'll do this again. And we'll just keep rinsing this stuff until I'm mostly just getting off clean water. And I'm going to pour the water into another pan just in case any of the values come over, any of the gold bond wires. We'll catch them in that pan, and we'll deal with that at the end. I'll give it a good 5 minutes before I pour it off. At least the first couple of times. Because the first couple of times, the water's going to be a really thick slurry of ash and metal. And it's going to take the metal a little while longer to sink through the water to the bottom. So the first few times, I will give it a good 5 minutes before I pour it off. Later, once we get rid of the bulk of the ash, and there's more water than slurry, the metal should settle quicker, and I can pour this stuff off quicker and get this done in a reasonable period of time. So that's what I'm planning on doing. So, okay, let's get started. All right, here goes the water. Okay, I think that's about enough. All right, let me give it some jet dry. And then we will proceed to mix it up. Trying to get it all wet. All of it. I don't want any dry powder in here. Making a slurry. So let me wash off my beater here. Okay, so we'll just let that sit for about 5 minutes, and then I will continue processing it. All right, I think I've waited long enough. That's a good 5 minutes. All the metal should sunk to the bottom by now. I'm going to gently pour this liquid off into this other container. Look how nasty that is. Yeah, this is that black plastic ash we're getting rid of here. Don't worry about the grass. Somebody's always worried about the grass. Been doing this for years. The grass doesn't seem to mind. Okay, I'm not going to dump it all off because I can't see where the water ends and the solids begin since it's so black. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to add some more water to it. Put some more jet dry in it. Agitate it again. And I'm going to let it sit for another 5 minutes. And then pour it off again. And maybe do that one more time. And by then I think the slurry will be thin enough that I can pour it a little quicker. But we're just going to make sure we don't lose anything. Of course, got this other tub right here that I'm pouring into gently. So if any metal does come over, it'll be in there and I can recover it later. All right, it's been about another 5 minutes. Let's pour off some more of this nasty stuff. And I can tell the slurry's already getting thinner. Gotten rid of a lot of the lightest of the ashy stuff in there. All right, so it's just wash, rinse, repeat. So I'm going to keep this up until mostly just clean water coming over into this tub. And then we'll process the stuff in the tub. Anyway, you don't have to watch every time. You've seen it now. I don't think I'm even going to need jet dry anymore. I'm just going to add water to it, stir it, and pour after I let it sit for a bit. So I'll just keep doing that until I'm getting clean water. Then I'll show you what I'll do next. Okay, I've kind of lost track how many times I've done this. I was talking to my stepson during it, but I don't know, 7, 8 times maybe. But look, the water's coming over pretty darn clear now. And I can see that there aren't solids coming over. And there's our remains down in there. So that's pretty clean. I think I'm going to stop there. And we'll take a look at what's inside this tub down here. And basically, I'm going to do the same thing on a smaller scale. I'm going to pour this stuff off into this tub and let it overflow. And we'll see what's in the bottom of it. See how many solids came over. I'd be very surprised if there aren't some in here. Not much, but there are some. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash this gently. Let it settle. And I'm going to these links because we're dealing with gold here. We're looking for gold bond wires. Now this slurry is pretty thin, and gold's 19 times heavier than water, so I'm expecting it to settle out pretty quickly. Do that. I'm going to wash this 1 or 2 more times. And then I'm going to put it in the blue bucket with the rest of the material over there. And we'll process it. Yeah, there are some solids staying in here. So we probably, at least early on, probably washed some solids over that we probably wanted to keep. So get this a little bit cleaner. This is looking pretty clean. Okay. And I'll wash this into the blue bucket. All right. Let's see what's in here. I'm not going to be too worried about doing this too awful many times. Just want to make sure. A little bit of solids. Looks pretty fine, which I would expect. Well, you know, we'll wash it a couple times and put what stays in here in the blue bucket. Probably getting back some of the heavier ash particles this way, and some of the small particles of IC chip dye that I got rid of before. And some of this stuff's probably going to clog my filters. I put it back in the blue bucket, but you know what? It's better than losing some gold. I mean, the price of gold these days, you don't want to lose any gold if you can avoid it. Yeah, that's coming across pretty clean. Put that in the bucket. And then we are done with gravity separation. And we can move on to the next process, finally. All right, the next step for this stuff is to get it in a beaker so I can start processing it in the fume hood to recover the gold. And from here on out, I'm using only distilled water. Now, the gravity separation was done with tap water, which has chlorine in it. But I don't want any chlorine in here right now for two reasons. Number one, there might be silver in here that we can get as a nice bonus. And number two, I'm not ready to start putting gold in solution yet. So, no chlorine at this point. I will actually give this stuff a couple of rinses with distilled water to get the chlorine out of it before moving on. And I want to make sure I get all of the stuff out of this bucket. That's looking pretty clean up in there. Okay. So there's our stuff. Alrighty, here we are in the fume hood. Got my IC chip remains in there. What's left? The volume is tremendously reduced after washing all of that plastic ash out of there. So that's good. We've got a lot less material to work with. Hopefully still containing all our gold. There's also a lot of other junk metal in there. I can see it looking at it. It might not show up on the camera, but there's still a lot of bits of probably iron, copper, stuff that came through the screen in the sifting process we did back in part one. So there's a lot of junk metal in there besides the gold. Plus there's some silver in there probably, hopefully. Silver's always a nice bonus. So I need to dissolve away all this junk metal before really going after the gold and the silver. And the way I'm going to do this is, rather than using my precious homemade nitric acid, which is such a pain in the butt to make, but a lot cheaper than buying it, I'll give it that. We'll save that for the later stages of the process where I don't need so much of it. For dissolving the bulk of the junk metal in here, we're going to go with what's called poor man's nitric acid. Basically sulfuric acid and a nitrate salt. But first we're going to put some basically distilled water in here. About 400 milliliters worth. Give something for the metal salts to dissolve in. We're going to put in some concentrated sulfuric acid. Putting this in alone is going to heat this stuff up something wonderful. I haven't even turned the hot plate on yet, and I'm sure, oh yeah, that warmed it up. And now I've got some sodium nitrate here. Got a little bit of it in a beaker, and I will start feeding some of this in. Let me turn the fume hood on because I think we might immediately start making some fumes here as this goes in. Oh yeah, you give it a little bit of a stir. Look at the bubbling. Oh yeah. Wow, we got a reaction going. Like I said, I don't even have the hot plate on yet. Wow, we got steam. We got orange fumes. Oh yeah, look at that. All right, so we are starting to dissolve that junk metal away in there. So I'm going to keep this up until there's really no more reaction going on. I'm going to turn the heat on a little bit because this initial reaction will die down fairly quickly, but heat will keep it going. But I will keep an eye on it, especially for the first half hour or so, and make sure it doesn't get so out of control it wants to boil over, because it could. There's a lot of metal in there. So once we get rid of the bulk of this junk metal, see the liquid's turning green, by the way. Once we get rid of the bulk of this junk metal, we'll test the liquid once the reaction dies down and see if there's any silver in it. If not, I'll pour off this liquid and we'll start over again. And eventually, we'll get the silver in solution, which will be a nice bonus, assuming there's a recoverable amount of silver in this batch of chips. You never know until you try it. So, we'll see. So, just going to let this cook for a while. Reaction dies down. I'll probably throw some more sodium nitrate in and see if that revives it. And when this batch of acid is used up, we'll test the liquid, like I said, and see what we got. All right, just going to let it cook. Well, the reaction was slowing down a little bit, so I put in a little more sodium nitrate off camera, and well, that revived it a lot. A lot bubbling going on, a lot of orange fumes again. So we are dissolving that metal in there. Everything except the gold. That should be staying behind. So that's about all I've got time for tonight. It's getting late. I got to go in and make supper pretty soon. Wife won't be home from work soon. So I'm going to let this sit and continue reacting and then turn the heat off and leave it overnight. And we'll pick up here in the morning and see what we can do with this stuff then. Okay, so I left this stuff on the heat until it was time to shut down for the night. And it's been sitting in my fume hood untouched for like 3.5, 4 days. Because, well, I was working on this the day before Thanksgiving, spent all day Thanksgiving cooking, socializing, went out of town the next couple of days, just got back. So this has just been sitting here the whole time. So what I want to know, what I have a burning desire to figure out is if we have silver in solution here. That'll tell us a lot. So I've got here some tap water with a little splash of muriatic acid in it. We get a little bit of this liquid. Just a little will do it. Tell us. Oh yeah, look at that. Got a nice cloud in there. That's silver chloride. And fair amount of silver in solution here. So that tells us that all of the other metals, all the other metals below silver on the reactivity scale are in solution. Otherwise, that silver would have cemented out in the last 4 days. It would not be in solution. So we've got all the steel, all the copper, all the tin, everything. You know, nickel if it was in there, lead if it was in there, it's all in solution. Okay, that's good. The real question, though, is do we have all the silver in solution? I don't know that. Maybe we only have some of the silver in solution. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back in the fume hood. I'm going to put it on some heat, warm it up a little bit, and put a few milliliters of nitric acid on it. And just let it cook for a little while and make sure we get all of the silver in here in solution. Plus any palladium that might be there. Nice little bonus there. Maybe we'll test it with some stannous chloride solution and see if we have palladium. That would be fun. Okay, so let me get this back in the fume hood and get it warming up. All right, this stuff's just starting to warm up. now that we have all those pesky base metals in solution, and we've just got silver and gold left in here, maybe some palladium, I am not afraid to use some of my precious homemade nitric acid on it, because I know it's not going to take that much to get the rest of the silver in solution if there's any left in there. So that's about 3 milliliters. And we'll just let this warm up and cook and see if we get any kind of reaction. If it doesn't look like there's much going on, I'll just assume all the silver's in solution and we are ready to decant off this liquid and then go after the gold. So we'll see what happens when it warms up. Alright, it's been 20-30 minutes. This stuff's warmed up. It's not anywhere near boiling, but it's good and warm. And I see a little bit of activity in there, so there's a little something going on. Going to agitate it a little bit and let it cook some more to make sure we get everything into solution. So I'll let this cook until I don't see any more activity, shut it down, and we'll test it and see if there's any palladium in there. And if not, well, we'll proceed to decanting off this liquid and going after the gold. Okay, so this stuff's had a chance to cool, and I'm pretty sure all the silver should be in solution. All the other metals were in solution. The silver had at least started going into solution, so I'm pretty sure all the silver's in solution now with the extra nitric acid I added. Let's check it for palladium. I've done a lot of work with palladium lately, like Joven's palladium. I'll put a link to that series in the upper right if you want to check it out. I always check my liquids for palladium now before doing anything else with it, just in case. You know, I find a lot of palladium in my stock pot too, so obviously I'm getting some palladium from this stuff, but generally not in very large amounts until it builds up in a stock pot a while. But let's see what we've got here. Let's see, then good focus. Yeah, all right. Well, what we've got here is what I kind of expected by putting stannous chloride on this stuff. What we've got here is a lot of silver chloride in there now that has the same blue-green color to it as this stuff did. It's got kind of an orange rind around it. I don't know. Maybe there's traces of platinum in there, but certainly not enough to worry about. So I think we'll just have to worry about the silver in here, and that's it. I don't think there's enough of anything else in there to worry about. So I'm going to decant this liquid off and give this stuff in the bottom of this a couple of rinses to try and get this green liquid out of it, blue-green liquid, because that contains, you know, all of the base metal salts, and I don't want them contaminating the gold anymore. So I'll give it a couple rinses with distilled water, and then we'll go in the fume hood and see if we can get the gold. Maybe we'll see if we can see the gold first. Now that I've got rid of all this other stuff, we might be able to see the gold in here. That's a possibility. And I'll just let this liquid accumulate until I have, say, several liters of it, and then I'll recover the silver from it just by cementation on copper. This little bit's not enough to worry about, but I'll keep it in a big jug until I have enough to actually cement the copper out. So we'll get the silver, and we'll get the gold. So, okay. So let me get to decanting and rinsing here. I have decanted off that blue-green liquid. I've rinsed this a few times. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and stratify this so that we can see a layer of gold in here on the bottom. So I'm hoping, just like one of my gold panning videos, if I do this right, the gold should sink to the very bottom. I stop agitating it, everything should freeze, and there should be a layer of gold here. Let me see if I can get you a close-up look at it with my phone. I know it's not easy to see, but see that color down there? There it is, that's a little better. That's our gold right there. I managed to stratify it. So that's our gold. We've got rid of almost everything else in here except the gold and the silicon IC chip dye remains. So now we just need to dissolve the gold and recover it. For that, we need aqua regia. All right, let's make some aqua regia. Now, there are other ways to deal with this stuff besides using aqua regia. Now, my buddy Jim uses a poop tube sluice to separate the gold from the IC chip remains when he does incineration of IC chips. And we may explore that sometime in the future. It's a pretty easy thing to make, even though it has a funny name. It's a pretty easy thing to make, and maybe I'll make one in the future and give it a try. But as usual, I'm pressed for time. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some aqua regia. Let me get the fume hood going over here. I'm going to put in some uriatic acid. Yeah, get it up to about the 400 milliliter mark, I guess. Lid it up. Put some heat to it. Not too much, though. I don't really want to boil it. Just warm it up. The aqua regia will work better. Gonna put in some of my homemade nitric acid. I'll put a link in the upper right how I make my nitric acid if you're interested. So that's maybe 2.5 milliliters, and that brings it up to maybe 4 milliliters. And I think we're going to leave it there for now and see how that looks. I have a sneaking suspicion there might still be some base metals in there. It's just the way it tends to work out with me with IC chip remains. No matter how hard I hit it with the acid treatments before I get to this stage, there's usually somewhere in there some base metals hanging out. I don't know how, but it happens. So, we'll let this warm up. I think I actually see some bubbling already, even though it's very cold out here today. It's in the 50s Fahrenheit. No, I'm wearing a jacket. So, but I think I still see a little bubbling already. So, but we'll let that warm up, and we'll see what kind of a reaction we get. And what I'm going to do, just to give you a little preview, is once the reaction dies down, I'm going to put a little bit more nitric acid in there and see if we get any further reaction. And I will keep that up until it looks like all of our metal is in solution. Then we'll denox it, filter it, and drop the gold and figure out how much gold we've got. Okay, so let's just let this warm up and see what happens. Okay, as this stuff's warming up, we're starting to get more of a reaction going on, starting to get some serious bubbling in there. As it continues to warm up, I think the reaction is only going to get stronger. We might even see some orange fumes developing, but that's great. Our gold is starting to go into solution. Excellent. Okay, we're just going to let this continue to cook for now until I don't see any more reaction. Okay, now the reaction is starting to intensify after a little while longer. Starting to get some brown-orange fumes in there. Good news, our gold is going into solution. So we're going to let this go to completion. And like I said, I'll put a little more nitric acid in it, small increments, until I think all of the metal is definitely in solution. So nothing to do now but continue to let it cook. Everything's going good. Okay, so off camera I have put a few half milliliter shots of nitric acid in there. The last one I put in really created no reaction. So I think this is probably done. But to be on the safe side, I believe I will do a second extraction on this stuff after we get this first one done. The liquid clinging to the watch glass may contain some gold, so we don't want to lose that. So I've got my usual saturated solution of sulfamic acid here. that I'm going to use for denoxing this. So the sulfamic acid will destroy any nitric acid left in there, as well as producing, as a byproduct, some sulfuric acid, which will help get any lead out of solution as lead sulfate. So let's see what happens. I'm going to put it in slowly. Oh yeah, we have excess nitric acid in there. I figured we would because the last shot I put in really didn't do much of anything. Got to put this stuff in slowly or it will boil right up out of the beaker. Got excess nitric acid in there. This will kill it for sure. All right. I'm going to call that well and truly denoxed there. Okay. Next, I'm going to put some ice in, cool this stuff down, dilute it a little bit so that we can filter it. The heat's already off, so I just got to wait for the ice to melt, cool this stuff down, and then we can filter it. Alrighty, the ice has melted, this stuff's cooled down, it's a little bit diluted. The color is not bad. It's more yellow than green, although I think there is some green there. It's okay. I like that. That's a good color. That's a good color. Okay, so I'm going to give this stuff a quick vacuum filtration. So we can get the solids back in the fume hood and do a second extraction. I want to do a second extraction. It's only going to cost a few cents worth of chemicals and a little time, a little electricity, and it'll give me great peace of mind. I got all the gold out of it that I can easily get out of it. So why not? All right, so let me get the pump going here. So I'm just basically going to pour the liquid off. Give it a rinse or two with distilled water and pour that through. But I'm going to leave the solids in the beaker here for the second extraction. Oh yeah, look at the color. That is so yellow. That's nice. That's nice. I think, for a change, I did a pretty good job of getting rid of the base metals before we went to Aqua Regia. For a change, anyway. Yeah, that's looking good. So anyway, once I get all this liquid through, and I get the solids in here rinsed a couple of times and get that liquid through, we'll just set this liquid aside. And after the second extraction, we'll combine the liquid from the two extractions. We'll drop the gold then. So I'll meet you back in the fume hood after I've got all the liquid through here. Oh yeah, I'm quite liking the looks of this stuff. Hardly any green to it. It's mostly just yellow. So I'm going to wash the yellow color out of this filter here. And since the filter caught some solids, I'm going to put that filter in the beaker so that when I do the second extraction, I'll do it on the solids in the filter plus any chloroauric acid that stays caught in the filter will wind up back in that beaker so we don't lose any gold at all. That's my goal, never lose gold. I'll just let this continue to pull water through the filter until it looks pretty dry. Take it out, put it in the beaker, and we'll be ready for the second extraction. Okay, there we are. There's our solids back in the fume hood, ready for a second extraction. Here's the liquid from our first extraction. I like the color. It is very slightly cloudy, and I assume that is probably silver chloride. I probably did not get all of the silver nitrate rinsed out of the solids down here before we went to Aqua Regia. I was expecting that to happen, but it's only very, very slightly cloudy, and that silver chloride is probably so fine I will not be able to filter it out no matter how many times I run it through my filter. But I'm not going to worry about that too much. I'm just going to put this in here until we're ready to add the liquid from our second extraction to it. I always refine my gold at least 3 times before I melt it down and make ingots. So that little bit of silver chloride, that's going to disappear long before I'm ready to melt my gold. So we won't worry about that. Okay, so let's make ourselves some aqua regia and do a second extraction on this stuff. This has actually been sitting here for 3-4 days because I've been busy at work. And in that time, this stuff has really clarified. And there's a layer of white on the bottom, which I assume is probably silver chloride. So that's good. What I will likely do is siphon the liquid out of that into another container and leave the white stuff in the bottom behind. So we'll get cleaner gold that way when I do drop the gold. But let's see if we can get some more gold out of this. So aqua regia again, muriatic acid. Not going to put in as much as last time. So I know there's not going to be nearly as much gold in here as last time. So maybe about half as much. A couple hundred milliliters. Okay. Get the fume hood going. Put some heat to it. And we'll put a little bit of my homemade nitric acid in it here. It's not going to take about as much. Probably not going to take as much of this as before either. What is that? That's about 2 milliliters, maybe a little more. I might put a bit more than that in it. We'll see. I will be denoxing it, so I'm not too worried about over nitricing it. So okay, we'll let that warm up and see if we get any kind of reaction. Well, this stuff's had a chance to heat up. We got a little bit of a reaction going on in there, but I don't know, it might be more boiling than anything. So, I don't know. I'm going to let it sit and cook, though, and see. I'm not really seeing any fumes in there. So, not sure what's going on. But I'm going to let it cook. Just let it go. Give it a chance before I shut it down and denox it. Okay, I've let this cook for probably the better part of an hour. Just been busy with other stuff, so picked up a load of scrap today. So I've been dealing with that. Let's denox it. Got my usual solution, saturated solution, sulfamic acid here. Same as last time. No real reaction. I'm thinking that means I've just boiled off all the nitric acid in there. That's what I'm thinking that means. But we'll put this in here just to make sure we are denoxed. And then some ice, as per usual. Cool it down. And we'll filter it. I think we'll do a status chloride test on it before we filter it. See if it's even worth filtering. There might not be any gold in it, or at least not enough to worry about. Maybe I'll just dump the liquid in my stock pot. We'll see. So we'll just let that melt, and we'll find out what we got in there. All right, the ice has melted. Let's do a stannous chloride test on this stuff. I'll tell you what, the color is really weak. So I'm not expecting too much. There might be a little gold in here that I just didn't manage to wash out of the solids earlier, but I don't know. Guess we'll find out. Zoom in a little bit. See what we got here. Stannous chloride. Oh. Yeah, that is a big negatory there. Maybe I did wash all the gold out of it. Maybe just the faintest hint of color. I don't know if that's showing up on the camera. Just the faintest hint of color. Okay, I'm not going to put this liquid here in with this liquid back here. What I might do is when I get a chance, I might filter this and throw it in my temporary stock pot just in case there is just a tiny little bit of precious metal in it. But it looks like that there's no point in adding it to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, what I talked about before is I'm going to siphon this really clear yellow liquid out of here and into a clean beaker. And I'm going to try and leave that white stuff on the bottom of the beaker behind. And then we will drop the gold out of this and see how much we get. All right, I have siphoned the gold-bearing solution out of that vacuum flask. Um, very clean now. Left that white stuff behind. It stuck to the bottom of the flask after being in there for 4 or 5 days, so that was great. So we got a nice clean solution here. I'll get that in the fume hood in a minute, and we will put some SMB on it and drop the gold out of it, see how much gold we get. This stuff back here, this is the blue-green liquid that has the silver dissolved in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue accumulating this. Every batch of chips I do is going to have some of this blue-green liquid. And I can just keep adding it to it, keep adding it to it. Get a fair amount in here. I will filter it, boil it down to concentrate it a little bit, and then I will recover the silver from it by cementing it out on some copper. I have videos where I do that. I'll put a link to one in the upper right. Okay, so now that you know where we are, let me get this in the fume hood and we'll get some SMB on it and drop this gold. Okay, so I have a solution of sodium metabisulfite here. I get mine from Stump Out by Boneed. It's a stump remover, which contains sodium metabisulfite. Now, not every stump remover contains sodium metabisulfite. Some contain other stuff. Some of those other ones have other useful chemicals in them. If you want to drop your gold, though, this is one of the chemicals that will do it. Here, sodium metabisulfite. So I bought like 3 or 4 containers of this stuff just before we were hit by 3 hurricanes, and my lab was flooded a couple of times. So it's very lumpy in here. So I managed to get out a few of the lumps and put them in some water here, some distilled water, and they are slowly disappearing. I don't know if this is enough SMB to drop this gold. Probably. If not, I will mix up some more. But this might do it. So let's zoom in and see if we can catch the color change. And I need to turn the fume hood on. That's going to make a bunch of nasty sulfur dioxide gas. Let's see. Oh, yeah, it's darkening up. Oh, yeah. It's darkening up before our very eyes. Yes, it is. I do believe we're getting a gold drop. Okay, good news. So we will just let that go and give it a chance for all the gold to come out of solution and drop to the bottom of the beaker. And then we'll see what we got. Well, looky what we got here after letting this sit overnight. It was late in the day when I did the gold drop, so I just let it sit overnight. Now this gold did take a little while to settle, so it's pretty fine. And I don't know if it's showing up on the video, but there is a slight blue-green color to the liquid. So that tells me we've still got some base metal contamination in there, and in my experience, I believe it's the base metal contamination that causes the gold to be fine, sometimes even colloidal, especially if you've got any tin in there. So this is dirty gold. I'm going to refine this a few more times before I make ingots out of it. So I want to get rid of all the base metal contamination. I think my next step is going to be I'm going to siphon this liquid off of the gold so I don't stir it up too bad. And then we'll start cleaning up the gold and dry it out and weigh it. Can you see the fine gold floating on the surface? Yeah, before I siphon the liquid off, I'm going to sink that with a spray of distilled water. Just disrupt the surface tension and it'll sink down to the bottom with the rest of the gold. Then I'll siphon the liquid off. Alrighty, let me siphon this liquid off of the gold in there. this will disturb the gold a lot less than trying to pour the liquid off or any other method I've found, so that fine gold will stay down on the bottom of the beaker where I want it to be. And I'm siphoning this liquid directly into my temporary stock pot here. I might siphon over a little bit of this fine gold, but well, it's a lot easier to get out of the temporary stock pot than my main stock pot. I'll give you a look in here. There is some black sediment forming on the base of the in the bottom of the bucket here. And from time to time, I will collect that black sediment and refine it. It generally contains a fair amount of gold. But let me get this siphoned off, and then I'll give you a look down in the bucket. And we'll move on to the next processing step with this gold. I'm eager to see how much we got out of that batch of IC chips. Now remember, I didn't weigh it, so we can't calculate a yield. It gets complicated because you got, it's a continuous process, not a batch process really. And I start by removing the legs, so that kind of screws up the weight too, versus still having the legs on them. It's really hard. I suppose if I just weighed a bucket full of chips and then ran them through the whole process, I could calculate a yield, but otherwise it's difficult. Okay, let me finish siphoning this, and then we'll move on. Okay, almost got all that liquid off. Might suck up a little bit of the fine gold right here at the very end, but that's okay. It's not going anywhere but into my temporary stock pot here. Okay, so let me rinse out my hose, and then we will take a look at the gold, and I'll give you a peek inside my temporary stock pot. Since the liquid level's low, you can see all the stuff on the bottom. So here's the gold on the bottom of the beaker. It's actually starting to consolidate quite nicely, which is a good sign considering how long it took to settle. It is consolidating, so that's nice. Okay, here's a look inside my temporary stock pot. Can you see the black powder over there? It's all over on one side of the bucket right now. That's the stuff I occasionally filter out and recover the gold from. Some of it's going to be gold like I just siphoned over. Some of it's going to be gold that goes over when I decant liquids over. And some of it's going to be gold that just continues to precipitate out of solution as it sits here in the temporary stock pot for a while. Usually when I dump the liquid off into my main stock pot, that's when I recover this stuff down here. It's a lot easier to get out of here than out of the main stock pot, so we'll just do the main stock pot maybe once or every year or two, but the temporary stock pot I might do a couple times a year. All right, so let's get to cleaning up this gold. I'm going to transfer it to a smaller beaker and start giving it some cleanup boils. Try and get rid of the last little bit of base metals in here, and hopefully we'll get it to consolidate together really well. Okay, so let me do that. Okay, I've returned the gold to the fume hood. Gonna give it some cleanup boils. I'm gonna give it at least 3 cleanup boils with distilled water. And I'm liking how the gold is staying on the bottom of the beaker so far. We'll see how it does once it's boiling. Hopefully the gold will still be on the bottom of the beaker. If the gold gets, suspended up in the water column, that's a bit of a problem. But it really doesn't look like it's colloidal, even though it took a long time to settle. So hopefully it will all consolidate nice. I'll dump the liquid from every cleanup boil off through a filter, so I'll capture any fine gold that does come over. Again, no losses is always my goal. And that filter I will keep with my rag and filter storage, and I'll get that gold back someday. So this is just starting to heat up. Bring it up to a good boil and see how the gold looks. All right, the liquid has come up to a boil, and it does look like the gold is mostly staying on the bottom of the beaker. That is excellent. All right, it's consolidating. It's hanging out on the bottom, not in the water column. So I'm going to drain this liquid off and give it 2 more boils, and then we'll dry it out and weigh it and see how much gold we got here. Finally, after all these steps. All right, there's the gold, drying out over low heat. Get it good and dry. We'll weigh it, see how much we got. All right, it is time to figure out just how much gold we got out of that group of chips I processed. Okay, some of it's stuck to the inside of the beaker here. Okay, here we go. 1.36 grams from this group of chips. And, well, I've got other groups that are, in the pipeline, ready to be delegged, incinerated, crushed, gravity separated, chemically treated, gold dissolved, gold dropped. So it's just a continuous thing. Every group I complete, I get a gram or maybe a gram or two of gold. So it's just a continuous thing. It builds up slowly over time. I try to keep the costs low associated with doing each group. I won't call them a batch because it's not really a batch process. It's just continuous, and each group is different than the one before, and you never know what you're going to wind up with. Plus, don't forget, we have silver, which I'm going to let accumulate before I cement the silver out on some copper. Then we'll see how much silver I get then, but that's way down the road and several groups of chips down the road. So I'm going to let that accumulate. But there you go. There's the whole process from sorting to gold in my little dirty gold depository. This will be refined a couple more times before I melt it down and make ingots out of it. I usually wait until there's an ounce or more before I even bother refining it. And we're probably getting close to an ounce in there by the feel of it. All right, well, I hope you found this whole process interesting, educational, informative, inspirational, whatever. If so, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching this one. Bye.